Hey, I'm Ton Vin, host of Seattle Eats, a food podcast from the Seattle Times and KUOW. Things are changing constantly in our food scene. This month, we lost some legendary Seattle restaurants, and two of the hottest openings were actually outside the city. We break it all down on the latest episode of Seattle Eats. Listen to Seattle Eats on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.
When it comes to the white-collar workforce, alarm bells are starting to go off.
The tech industry is again seeing widespread layoffs.
Google, Amazon, and Snap are among the companies continuing to downsize.
And a lot of those laid-off workers are struggling to find new gigs.
Jobless claims spiked past 240,000 on Thursday. That's the highest number in 3 months, which is sparking concern that unemployment is on the rise.
There's a lot going on in the economy right now, but some experts speculate that these are early signs of AI moving into the workforce and replacing jobs. I'm Joshua McNichols.
I'm Monica Nicholsberg. This is Booming, a podcast about the economic forces shaping our lives here in the Pacific Northwest. Microsoft is one company at the center of this debate. So I asked its president, Brad Smith, is AI already taking our jobs? And if so, what can we do about it? That's coming up.
It used to be, when you took a computer on the road, it was difficult to link back to the other computers in your office. Starting with Windows 95, it's much easier to stay connected. Start communicating. Start Windows 95.
So Joshua, Microsoft hit a huge milestone this week. It's turning 50.
I can relate. I just turned 51.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. So does that mean Microsoft has to get a prostate exam every year?
Well, I didn't get that personal in my interview with its president, although I did ask him some hard questions. Instead, we talked about how Microsoft, at this middle-aged state of its journey, is bracing for the next technology revolution. Microsoft's origin story traces back to the PC revolution. Its software was what allowed personal computers to proliferate. Their big, audacious goal was to get a PC on every desk in the world.
I mean, they've changed a lot, computers, but are they going to be accessible to even an idiot like me?
Well, I think we will get one in every office, in every home. That was our original vision.
And they succeeded at that.
To do that, we're going to have to make them very familiar.
Yeah.
In fact, I brought one of the latest machines here because for the first time, we're coming out with computers that understand handwriting.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked because when I was in elementary school, even then we weren't using PCs for much. They were like this novelty that sat in the corner of the classroom and kids played Oregon Trail on it at recess.
And look how far we've come. Today, it's hard to imagine that there was ever a time before computers and before digital technology was in basically everything that we use. I think that could also be the case 50 years from now when we think about AI. And that's why I wanted to talk to Microsoft's president, Brad Smith. He's been there since the early 90s, back when Windows 95 was the hot new thing in technology. So he's had a front row seat to the first digital revolution. And I wanted to know how he's thinking about this next one and the mass job displacement that we could see. Especially because so much of his role involves big picture thinking about the impact of technology on society.
Can't wait to hear it.
Okay, here's my conversation with Microsoft President Brad Smith. Brad, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
So we're here because Microsoft has a big birthday coming up. And just like in those early days of the company, Microsoft finds itself at the frontier of another technical revolution. But it took decades for Microsoft to fulfill this vision of putting a PC on every desk. How much faster do you think we could see AI becoming that ubiquitous? And what does that mean for the disruption that we could face?
Well, I think AI is accelerating quickly in terms of the state of the technology. It's proving more beneficial, useful every day. I think its adoption will spread quickly. And at the same time, at the end of the day, especially when you think about the planet and everyone who lives here, these things take years and decades. But the truth is, I think it's the early adopters, the companies, the governments, the communities, the countries, those that adopt it the fastest, they're probably going to grow economically the most. So we'll see a little bit of a race when it comes to AI adoption.
Was there the same level of anxiety around personal computing that there is around AI?
I don't think there was, and I think in part it's because we had not seen new technology spread into the workplace and affect people's jobs the way PCs actually ended up impacting the economy. Yeah, it's been a long time since telephones had entered the workforce. Maybe there was less need for messengers and telegraph operators, but the PC actually had an enormous impact on the workplace, on the economy, on jobs. And I think in part because we've lived with that, and it's been a mixture of easy and hard things in terms of economic adaptation. And then people see what it means when you have a computer that can help reason. I think people do ask more questions, and there's more excitement and on certain days, more trepidation at the same time.
I think that the risk to jobs, particularly white-collar jobs, does feel unique to this moment. Are we already seeing AI replace jobs at scale?
I don't think we're seeing AI replace jobs at scale. Not yet. I think we're seeing AI impact some job categories. Say customer service is one where it's probably spreading more quickly than in other parts of, say, the workplace in a country like the United States. I think we're still at a point, I fundamentally think we're going to remain at a point where the greatest risk to people's jobs is not going to be AI. It's going to be people who know how to use AI better than people who don't. And that, I think, frames the skilling challenge that I think is actually more important to more people than just being displaced by technology alone.
But how would we know? I mean, it's not like companies are going to publish reports saying we automated away 10 full-time positions this year. I think that it might look like a reduction in force. I mean, take Microsoft, for example. Microsoft and others in the tech industry have already undergone mass layoffs in the past couple of years, while often still making healthy profit margins and investing heavily in AI. Can we see these layoffs as the canary in a coal mine?
If so, I think it's quite a long ways away for most parts of the economy. We'll have good data, not because companies will necessarily publish, but in the United States, we have this thing called the census and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they do publish an extraordinary picture every year, and it goes back for a century or more. And I think what it has shown in the past and what it will show in the future is that there will be certain job categories that will grow, and there will be others that will diminish, and there will be many that will change. When I started as a lawyer in the 1980s, I went to a law firm. I wanted to have a personal computer, and basically at that time, there was one so-called legal secretary for every 2 lawyers. Today in a law firm, basically there's one legal secretary for every 7. Because people do their own writing on a laptop computer, for example. So we've seen this kind of progression, and yet we also live in an economy where the unemployment rate is low. The real question, I think, is can we generate new jobs economically through productivity gains and broad skilling of the population? And then can we help people adapt? It may be just their job changing as distinct from their job going away, or in other instances, it may be people who end up finding or even needing to go get a new job. This has been happening for 300 years since the first industrial revolution started, and I say that not to diminish its significance, but rather to, I think, suggest that what matters is a constant effort to help people learn and adapt, learn new skills. In this case, how to use AI in their work.
Will legal secretary or paralegal still be a job in 5 years?
Well, interestingly, at a company like Microsoft, when I joined 30 years ago, we basically had one paralegal for every lawyer. Now we have one paralegal for every 4 lawyers, and a lot of it is because we rely on digital technology to answer the questions of many of our employees. What I do know is this: we will still need people who can think. In the legal profession, for example, we will still need people who can sit down with clients and really understand what their problems are and how to solve them. And I guarantee nobody's going to send a computer with AI to the courtroom. Lawyers are going to be standing up in front of juries and in front of judges and examining witnesses. All of those are going to be human beings. So there will be obviously this expanding role for AI. I'll bet you that the lawyer that goes into the courtroom will have used AI to help identify, say, the documents to talk to a witness about. It's really, I think, more about the integration of AI into the work that people do for most jobs than thinking about it as only humans or only, say, artificial intelligence.
So you're not worried about an AI coming for your job?
I believe that there's still going to be somebody like me at a company like Microsoft. There's going to be a lot of folks like me who have been here for the past 3 or 5 decades as we approach our 50th birthday. And what people do will change. It always does, especially in the world of technology. But I fundamentally believe in AI as something that's a tool to help humans do things better, even though there are certain job categories where there may be some categories of work that will no longer be done the way they are. They may not be done by humans at all. It hopefully will frankly be the parts of work that we find the least interesting. And in that, I think there's some hope as well.
I think that a big part of the anxiety just comes from the rate of change here. What can we do to prepare for something that is barreling toward us so quickly?
First of all, I think it's worth recognizing that is a good, natural, reasonable, and important question for people to ask. I think especially I find it's a question on the minds of parents. They look at their kids, whether their child is 5 or 15 or 25 or 35, and they ask themselves, what does this mean for my child's future? I think the key to adaptation is, frankly, access to the technology, the use of the technology, and really learning how to integrate the technology in the work that people do. And yeah, I think this is where technology access in schools is so important. It's where we in the industry need to help make this more accessible and always more affordable for people. We need to make learning fun. And AI actually can help do that. It can help connect with, say, a student. It's much more natural for students. It can help change the work of teachers. It can take the planning of a course and put it into the hands of, say, a computer assistant who works with that teacher, helps automate the preparation of the course materials, helps grade, say, a math exam. I think if we can do things like that, where teachers can spend more time with kids as students, that is what gives me hope. I don't ever think we can say we know how to solve every problem, but when we identify these opportunities and specific problems, I actually am very optimistic about what we in the tech sector, in partnership with teachers and parents and communities, can actually do.
So education could be a solution, and making sure that the next generation is prepared to use this technology. But what about the 3 out of 4 paralegals that Microsoft no longer needs, or computer programmers, people who have already gone long down a career path? You mentioned reskilling earlier, but historically we haven't done a great job reskilling people when there were less significant technological revolutions underway than this one. I mean, I'm thinking of manufacturing workers, for example. What gives you the confidence that we're going to get it right on this much faster timeline?
I would say if you look at the history of the last 30 years, you're right to point out that the impact has been varied. Yeah, and if you look at who fundamentally has benefited more than others, there is one attribute that has had more impact than any other, and that's education. The truth is, I think that the 30 or 40 years of real digitization, has had the harshest impact on people who didn't graduate from high school or didn't go beyond high school and get a post-secondary credential. And I think that there's an important lesson there. And that is how we really invest in ongoing learning and training opportunities for everyone. And I think we live in a time when those opportunities are more varied than in the past. I think we've learned not everybody needs a 4-year college degree, but if somebody can go to a community college in the evening for a semester, they can come away from that experience. And you see this in the data, and their wages rise. And that is true not just for jobs that use digital technology or use AI. I think that it's true across the board. Interestingly, in the United States today, one of the greatest shortages we have is skilled labor. Even for us in the tech sector, people come to us and say, we will help you get more electricity. We will speed the permits so you can get more electricity for your data centers faster than before. And my reaction is, that's great, thank you, but you should understand the biggest barrier we face is not getting access to electricity. It's getting access to electricians. There's a shortage of electricians in the United States. We estimate that the country is going to need to bring into that occupation 500,000 new electricians over the next decade to replace people who are retiring and to meet rising demand. So I always say, let's step back and understand the labor market as a whole. Let's frankly reinvest in our high schools in what was called the industrial arts. When I was a high school student in the 1970s, the ability to work with your hands and your brain together. It's things like a data center that involve electricity or liquid cooling. It turns out that those jobs are by pipe fitters or plumbers. There are so many areas across the economy where I think that there is opportunity, and that is not to diminish the challenges that come with change, but it is to highlight that unless we actually do better work societally, really bringing together organized labor and businesses and government and nonprofits, we're going to fall short. And what we're going to see is economic growth constrained by a shortage of the right people in the right jobs. That's the problem that I actually worry about the most.
I worry about that too, especially over the past few months, talking with folks who have been laid off, a lot of folks in the tech industry, including at Microsoft, who can't find another computer programming job. What's going to be that bridge to help them? There's a shortage of electricians, but it's not like the programmer who's been out of a job for 3 months can suddenly go become an electrician. So AI just strikes me as this nuclear bomb that's going off in the white-collar workforce, and that it's going to take really big ideas to deal with something so big. Could we see a tax on every ChatGPT query that stands up a giant reskilling institute to make sure that we don't leave large swaths of the workforce behind? Does Microsoft have any ideas like that?
Well, I definitely think that we are going to need to invest together in more opportunities for people to master new skills. And that can take a variety of forms. I actually think that the greatest asset of the United States is the 1,100 community colleges we have today. Now, the interesting thing about community college enrollment, especially in a state like Washington, where we live and work at Microsoft, is that community college enrollment is down compared to pre-pandemic levels. So the interesting thing is we have capacity. We have this crown jewel that I feel we underappreciate as a country, namely our community colleges. We need to put them to work. And where we probably need to invest is in two specific areas. One is in the training of faculty, teachers in schools, or say faculty at a community college, so that they are experts at the latest when it comes to the latest technology, like AI. And that's been an area we've been investing as a company. It's actually an area where tech companies as a whole are able to help, in part because you can create digital curriculum, and that can be replicated free because it's all in digital form. But I think the other area where we need to invest as a country is in financial aid for students who want to go take, say, a community college course. If there's one thing that's true about community colleges, it's the fact that many students who go there are actually oftentimes adults. They have families. They're not oftentimes as affluent. One, car accident or problem with their car, may mean that they can't afford to continue another semester's tuition. And we're talking about $1,000 or $2,000 being the make or break issue for them. And then you have this great irony. We have done this a wonderful job as a country over many decades in creating financial aid programs like what are called the Pell Grants for students who want to go get a 4-year college degree. But those are not accessible to students who want to just get a course oftentimes or a credential, a certificate. So yes, we do need to invest. Do we need a different kind of tax system for that? I don't actually think we do. We just need to recognize we have these enormous assets as a country that we're not using. Let's, for gosh sakes, put them to work.
Is that true? I mean, we're seeing budget shortfalls across levels of government and efforts to tax the corporations that earn the most money in those places, in Washington, for example, to try to wrestle some of the concentration of wealth that technology has brought out of the hands of the few and into the hands of the many. AI strikes me as something that could accelerate that trend substantially. Isn't the tax system a way for the government to sort of level the playing field there a little bit?
Well, if you take a state like Washington, Washington state has increased its taxes as much or more than any state in the United States over the last decade. It added a 7% capital gains tax that didn't exist before. It only applies it to, frankly, who are people who are pretty darn well-to-do, because it doesn't kick in unless you have capital gains of $250,000 a year. So it doesn't apply it to most earners. So we've seen spending at the state level here in Washington rise. It's risen 40% over the last 4 years. Even if there's no increase in taxes, state spending can rise another 7% in the next 2 years. Most families are not going to be able to increase their spending by 7% over the next 2 years. So we have more money to spend as a state. The state government can allocate more. It can prioritize. It just needs to prioritize and spend its money well. Let's focus on public schools. Let's focus on our community colleges. Those are state institutions in Washington state. Let's focus on public safety. I think most people who live in the state have concerns about that. Let's take steps to make housing more affordable, something that companies like Microsoft and Amazon have been spending hundreds of millions of dollars to support broadly across the community. There is more to do. Absolutely. Let's also just be careful. The fundamental driver of faster state spending in Washington state has actually been the economic engine of the state. Let's not put the economic engine of the state at risk, because there's just no way you can sustain growth in spending at the governmental level if your economy moves into a decline.
Well, the tax package that Washington state Democrats have put forward includes investments in education, particularly K-12 special education, which you mentioned as a priority. Governor Ferguson wants to make substantial investments in public safety, but I know that Microsoft is really concerned about that tax package. So if state Democrats or state lawmakers across the aisle were to introduce a really shrewd tax package that said, we are going to tax companies that are at the forefront of AI and use that money to reskill anybody who's been laid off from a white-collar job, would Microsoft support it?
I think there's always an opportunity for conversation. I do think it's about prioritization. It's a conversation that starts with how fast or how much do people really want state spending to continue to rise? Why is a 7% increase not enough? Because without a tax increase, there will be a 7% increase in the budget. How much more than 7% do people want? And what does that mean in terms of the impact on the economy? There are proposals like a payroll tax, for example, that would be a tax on jobs. That kills jobs. I mean, Seattle has tried this, and the result has been the movement of some significant number of jobs from Seattle to the east side. So now people say, let's spread it to the rest of the state. I don't think that's good for jobs in the state. It will, I think, create pressure on jobs to leave. So let's remember what fuels the economy, and let's get a balance between what is needed to have a healthy economy and a healthy state government.
You mentioned earlier the anxieties that parents feel around AI and wanting to ensure that their kids have a strong future as a parent of young kids. I can certainly relate to that. I know your kids are all grown up now, but what advice do you have for the young people in your life who are thinking about what they should pursue to be economically competitive?
Well, I would say I believe that success for people comes out of three things. First, find something you love doing. Yeah, your work should be something that brings you a reward beyond the money that it helps you earn. So think about what you love to do. Second, make learning something that you love to do as well. Because the key to success in life is always to keep learning. And I think if we look towards the future, AI is one of the good things to learn, and the best way to learn it is to use it.
And maybe consider electrical engineering.
Believe me, if you love working with electricity, there are really bright futures for people who want to be electricians or people who want to be plumbers. There are so many areas of life, and that's one of the great things about our community colleges. They have courses, and our labor unions have apprenticeships. All of these things are opportunities for people.
Great. Well, Brad Smith, thank you so much for the thoughtful conversation.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Scott Greenstone. It is hard to keep track of everything happening in 2025's extremely fast news cycle. So this week, we're taking some time to focus on a few stories that have been flying under the radar here in Washington. Potential changes to immigration detention, rent prices, and what a newborn baby whale has to do with state politics. We're discussing it all on the newest Sound Politics, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Monica, that was a great interview. I do have some questions, though. You know, he brought up reskilling as this central factor in how we can measure whether the benefits of AI have been equally shared across society. And I recently went to the launch of AI House, which is a startup incubator for AI companies in Seattle. And, you know, one of the partners there is Ada Developers Academy, and they teach coding skills, for example, to people from disadvantaged backgrounds. And the leader of that is Tina Marie Gulley, and she said that the people that she teaches are some of the most vulnerable to having their jobs replaced by AI. So they've been trying to retool to focus on AI literacy as part of their curriculum. But one thing she mentioned is that if we're looking at history, oftentimes the sort of social safety net, which includes reskilling, we can fail to invest in it enough, and sometimes that can even be defunded or taken away. And when I heard Brad Smith talking about, you know, sharing this responsibility, I heard him also saying, you know, we don't need new taxes. Microsoft, you know, it's about all of us paying it. And it feels a little bit like nobody wants to take responsibility for the costs of this.
I think that that's a fair point. You know, companies are always going to try to invest their own money rather than handing it over to the government. That's not particularly surprising or unique to Microsoft. So I understand where they're coming from there. At the same time, I'm still hungry for a company, a regulator, anyone I talk to in this AI reporting to just tell me, like, here's my big idea. Here is how we can solve the big AI job displacement problem. Because asking individuals to do it, in some cases, works out. You know, my husband is a self-taught software engineer. I have pretty high confidence that he has the support and resources that he needs to learn new skills. I mean, that's part of the job. But take Brad's example of paralegals who are seeing their numbers thinned. I actually went to AI House recently, too, and I demoed a product from this new startup called Caddy that records someone doing basic office work at a place like a law firm and then creates software that can automate that work. I could see this putting paralegals out of business. Some of them might be able to go back to community college. Some of them might be single moms who are helping their kids with homework at night and can't go to night school. I think anytime we shift the responsibility to deal with massive societal upheaval only onto individuals, people are going to be left behind. And so what I'm still craving is a society-wide big vision for how we're going to deal with this disruption.
Yeah. All right. I hope you dig something up in your reporting.
I will let you know if I do. That's it for Booming. Thank you so much for listening.
If you have a question about the economy that you want us to answer, email us at booming@kuow.org. We hope to use some of these ideas in future episodes.
And extra thanks to those of you who are donating to the show. We need your support. If you want to donate, go to kuow.org/booming. And thanks.
Our producer is Lucy Suchek. Our editor is Carol Smith. I'm Joshua McNichols.
I'm Monica Nicholsberg.
And we'll see you next time.